This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi meets with strategic partners in the Middle East. South Sudan runs out of COVID-19 jabs as the country closes COVID vaccination centers. And violence in eastern DR Congo displaces about 20,000 people. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program. In business news, there are fears unrest in South Africa could dent the country's economic growth this year. And ahead in your sports, Egypt and Cameroon eye the first ever Olympics medals in shooting and judo. Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister is in Algeria, wrapping up his tour of Arab countries. Wang Yi met with the heads of state in Syria and Egypt. His talks have aimed at solidifying China's relationships with strategic partners in the Middle East. Adel Mahroui reports from Cairo.
This week, China showed massive support for three Arab nations. In Syria, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi began his regional tour by telling Syrian President Bashar al-Assad that China intends to boost cooperation with Syria. Visiting Damascus the day after President Assad was sworn in for a fourth term, Wang Yi says China opposes any attempt to seek regime change in Syria.
The current Syrian regime is the foundation to build a modern Syrian state. Any change in Syria will ripple major negative effects in the region. China wants to have a share in Syria reconstruction to restore normal life to it. China has a share of investments in Syria, and that helps in development.
In Egypt, Wang Yi expressed more support for China's strategic partners in the Arab world. He announced that Egypt will be a dialogue partner in the Shanghai Cooperation Council, a body concerned with battling extremism. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi pledged support for China's Belt and Road Initiative, aiming to make Egypt an important gateway for China's business in the Middle East and Africa.
We see Egypt as the most important comprehensive strategic partner in the Arab world, the Islamic world, African and developing nations. We are very keen to develop our relations with Egypt.
On Sunday, Wang Yi and the Egyptian Foreign Minister attended a ceremony marking a vaccine production milestone, the production of 1 million doses of the Sinovac COVID-19 jab. Egypt is the first country in Africa to jointly make a coronavirus vaccine with China. Wang Yi's final stop is in Algeria, where he continues his regional talks about boosting China's regional ties, expanding economic cooperation, and fighting terrorism.
There is a strategic effect cooperation between Algeria and China. For decades, they've been partners in development. Wang Yi's visit revives these strong ties. Algeria has ambitious projects to restructure itself after the revolution. China goes there to support investment and stability.
Algeria completes Wang Yi's Arab tour. He started in Syria in the eastern region, passing through Egypt in the heart of the Arab world, and finalizing China's diplomatic mission at the Maghreb in the west. Algeria is the fourth biggest economy in Africa, which translates into a huge potential for expanding economic cooperation. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
South Sudan is currently battling the Alpha, Delta and Beta variants of COVID-19. But the East African country has run out of COVID-19 vaccines. It has now been forced to close down all its COVID-19 vaccination centers. South Sudan received 132,000 doses of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine from the COVAX facility, but it donated around 72,000, that's more than half of them, to Kenya over concerns that they would expire before use. South Sudan had a slow rollout of the vaccination program. The health ministry says the doses that remained have been used to vaccinate more than 50,000 people with the first dose and 4,000 of them with the second dose. Around 9,000 healthcare workers have also been vaccinated. Well, let's hear more now from CGTN's Patrick Oyet. He's in Juba for us. Patrick, what can you tell us about South Sudan closing down all the COVID-19 vaccination centers? What impact is this having in the country?
Yeah, Beatrice, this is the announcement that just came from the government, and as you rightly said, you know, when the 132,000 doses came in the country, the vaccination started moving very slow, and because of that, the government had to return 72,000 doses to COVAX facility, and later to some went to Kenya, of course, and later they changed strategy. You know, before that there were only 3 vaccination centers, for example, in Juba, but after realizing that very few people were turning up for the vaccination, the government had to open up and all health facilities in Juba, for example, were having the vaccines. They also moved the vaccines across the country. Every state had vaccines, and health centers across the states also had vaccines. So that made the process really to move faster. But also we are talking of a small number of vaccines here, not a very big number, because out of the 132,000, 72 were given back. So it was only 60,000 doses that really remain, and the government says, of course, it is now waiting for another batch of the vaccines from COVAX facility, because remember, there are some people who only took 1 dose and they are waiting for their 2nd dose. So they are saying that they hope they will receive this remaining or the next batch of the vaccine soon, so that they continue with the process. Basically, that's what is happening as far as the vaccines are concerned.
So as the country is waiting to get more vaccines there, Patrick, what is South Sudan's current coronavirus situation, and how is the government dealing with it?
Yeah, the current situation, according to government records, of course, more than 10,000 people have been infected by the virus, but 119 people have so far lost their lives as a result of the virus. Many people here still believe that the number of people infected could be higher, because the testing facilities are majorly only in Juba, and there are about 5 facilities that are carrying out this test, and people are not voluntarily going to conduct tests. You know, people only go for a test when they either want to travel somewhere, or because they are going for a certain occasion and they are required to have been tested. That's why that's when you see people going for the test. So there's a thinking among many people that we talk to that the number of people infected could actually be higher, but just because many people are not carrying out the test, that's why the number looks small. That's about 10,000, and then those who have lost their lives are 119 in number. Yeah.
Patrick Oyet joining us there from Juba. Thank you. Coronavirus-linked deaths in Africa surged by 43% in the space of a week. The World Health Organization has warned that hospitals in the most impacted countries are reaching breaking point. During a virtual news conference, Dr. Mashihizo Moeti, the World Health Organization's Regional Director for Africa, said this is driven by a lack of intensive care beds, oxygen, shortages of health workers and infrastructure. The contagious Delta variant of COVID-19 has now been detected in 21 African countries. Nokutula Shabalala takes a look at some of the African countries badly affected by the new wave of COVID-19.
The Delta variant of the coronavirus has rapidly become dominant across much of the world. Dozens of developing countries are experiencing increased infections and deaths due to the highly contagious virus. Vaccination levels in poorer countries have been low and have failed to prevent a surge in cases. That's compared to economies in Europe and the US, which have high vaccination rates and have started to reopen as COVID infections and deaths reduce. Africa has recorded 1 million new cases over the past month. According to the Africa CDC, that brings the total number of infections across the continent above 6,200,000. Africa has also recorded over 157,000 deaths. The Delta variant, which was first identified in India, accounts for 95% of cases in South Africa. Fewer than 3% of people are fully vaccinated in South Africa. The rollout of the jab has been hampered by supply failures and a week of political violence. According to the World Health Organization, 5 countries have reported record numbers of cases this month. Namibia, South Africa, Tunisia, Uganda and Zambia accounted for 83% of deaths on the continent. Namibia has 1.2% of the population vaccinated. Namibia has a daily rate of 28 COVID deaths per 1 million people, while Tunisia has the world's second highest COVID death rate. The WHO also blames public fatigue at measures such as mask wearing and social distancing for the increase in COVID-19 cases. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
Well, we are now joined by Dr. Mary Stephen, the Technical Officer at the World Health Organization's Regional Office for Africa in Brazzaville, in the DRC. In Brazzaville, Congo-Brazzaville, the Republic of Congo. Thank you for joining us on the program. What is the reason behind the rise in COVID-19 cases and deaths?
Thank you for having me. So the cases on the continent, of course, they have been increasing for the past 8 weeks, including deaths. And some of the factors associated with this rise in number of cases include the following. First of all, relaxation of the lockdown measures to reopen the economy has facilitated the mixing once again of population. Secondly, the poor compliance with preventive measures, wearing face masks, keeping a distance away, keeping hand hygiene, and avoiding unnecessary mass gathering. Then thirdly, the issue of the Delta variant, which is highly transmissible, and then the vaccine, the low vaccine coverage that we have on the continent. So it predisposes us to having more susceptible people that can easily contract the COVID virus. So these are some of the factors that are associated with the increase in number of cases and deaths that we are seeing on the continent.
Well, Dr. Stephen, where are we seeing most of these cases? Which countries are most affected?
So we from the beginning of the third wave and second wave, of course, for Uganda, cases started increasing in countries like the DRC, South Africa, Namibia, and Uganda. Right now, we are also seeing additional increase in number of cases in countries like Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, and countries like Senegal. We have also seen increase in Sierra Leone and Liberia. So all majority of these countries, of course, are dealing with the Delta variant as well, plus the combination of factors that I've already mentioned. So hospitals are getting filled in majority of these cases due to the increase in number of cases.
So what is the status of vaccination in Africa? Because we do know that the continent is having difficulty in accessing vaccinations and vaccines.
So just to give you an overview of where we are with regards to vaccination, so far we have received almost about 74 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine on the continent. And we have administered over 57 million, which is about 77% of the doses we have received. And then about total of 20 million people now have been fully vaccinated on the continent. So we have made some progress over the last few weeks. But of course, if you look at the coverage we have on the continent compared to the global coverage, we are really still lagging behind. And we continue to advocate for availability of more vaccine on the continent, and as well as the general population. If the vaccine becomes available to an individual, they should also be out there to receive the vaccination.
Dr. Mary Stephen joining us there from Congo or Brazzaville. Thank you. Well, our correspondents in North, South and East Africa are following those developments.
It's been described as a worst week for the African continent since the first case of COVID-19 was recorded on the continent. In the past week, several African countries have reported a record number of cases and deaths. I'm joined by colleagues from South Africa, Julie Shire, Farai Mokituya in Zimbabwe, and Adnan in Tunisia to give us an overview of the situation around the continent. First, here in Kenya, the country is in the midst of a third wave fueled by the Delta variant of the virus. There are about 1,200 hospitalized cases, with the infection rate hovering at about 8.2% from Monday. Now, about 1.6 million Kenyans have been vaccinated with the AstraZeneca. I beg your pardon. About 1.6 million Kenyans have received the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine, while 600,000 Kenyans have received the second dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, the government says it is trying to do all it can to ensure that vaccines are rolled out as soon as possible, and is expecting a batch of about 13 million doses in August, which is next month. It says that about 10 million Kenyans will receive their vaccines by year's end, and another 26 million Kenyans will receive their vaccines by next year. However, when you consider that this is a country with a population of about 50 million Kenyans, then this is but a drop in the ocean, and the current vaccination percentage rate is at 2%. I'll now cross over to Julie to give us an overview of the situation in South Africa. Julie?
Thanks, Robert. South Africa has struggled to contain this third wave, which has been largely driven by the Delta variant. But despite the stricter level 4 lockdown restrictions, deaths have shot up to over 600 in a single day. Just yesterday, we had 212 people succumb to this disease. And obviously, there's been concerns that these cases might spike after last week's violence and looting and unrest in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng province. So South Africa at the moment stands with 2.3 million cases. It is the highest on the continent, and it has recoveries around 89%. But sadly, 67,000 people have died from the virus. The country has administered over 5 million vaccines, and those have been Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. But those who have gone for their second vaccine are only counting as 1% of the population. So South Africa is aiming to reach 60% of its 60 million population by the end of this year. And now when we go across the border into Namibia, things are very difficult there at the moment. The country has reported over 100,000 confirmed cases and around 2,500 deaths. Windhoek, the country's capital, has run out of burial space. And in a country where a population is only 2.5 million, everyone there unfortunately knows somebody who's died. And they as well have had a problem with their vaccinations, where only 1.2% of the population has been vaccinated. Their vaccine campaign had been shelved due to the unavailability of vaccines, but that kind of resumed this weekend when they received 250,000 doses of Sinopharm. So we now cross to Farai Mokituya in Harare, Zimbabwe, to see how the situation is there.
Well, thank you so much, Julie. In Zimbabwe, the Delta variant accounts for about 80% of new infections, and those infections are on the rise, unfortunately. In the past 7 days, there have been over 17,000 new cases and 512 deaths. 102 of those occurred on a single day, July 16th. And that is the highest number of deaths per day that Zimbabwe has seen since this pandemic broke out. Officials here say that this is very alarming, and what is of more concern is that there's also been an increase, or reports of an increase, in infections amongst healthcare workers, doctors and nurses. And that is of concern because it may compromise the capacity to which the health services sector can respond to the pandemic if the caregivers themselves are ill. Zimbabwe is targeting to inoculate about 1 million people during the next 2 weeks, where it has put the country under level 4 lockdown. That means that travel is restricted business hours are restricted, and an overnight curfew has been extended. The situation is equally as worrying in neighboring Zambia, where there is an unprecedented increase in the number of infections and deaths too. 91 deaths have been reported in the past week. 10,500 cases have been confirmed in the last 7 days too. This pandemic has forced the closure of school. It has disrupted business and everyday life in Zambia, and authorities there are now urging Zambians to go out and get vaccinated, especially because there has been thus far a slow uptake of these vaccines. By 18th of July, only 62,000 people had been fully vaccinated. That represents just 0.03% of the population. So clearly, a lot more work needs to be done in terms of ramping up and accelerating that vaccination drive. I'll now hand you over to Adnan Chawachi in Tunisia.
Thank you so much. Well, the situation is also very complicated and very difficult here in Tunisia, in North Africa, with over 17,000 victims of COVID-19. At least 17,000 people have died of COVID-19. And the rate of infections and deaths is on the rise since July, and the hospitals have reached their maximum capacity. That's why Prime Minister Hisham Mshishi has signed a decree ordering the requisition of all private health facilities and clinics to support the national effort against COVID-19. The less than 1 million people have already been inoculated, have their first and their second dose of COVID of the vaccine. The daily target is 100,000 vaccinations per day, while we have recorded less than 45,000 vaccinations per day. The President of the Republic has ordered the army, the military health personnel, to intervene in the south of the country to step up the vaccination campaign. And during the 3 days of the Eid al-Adha holiday, the health ministry will open for 2 days, will open the vaccination centers for people aged 18 to 45. People aged 45 years old will have the AstraZeneca vaccine, and people aged 18 and over 18 will have the Sinopharm vaccine. Some 500,000 vaccines have been made available following donations from friendly countries. The wave of support with Tunisia is very important, and we are witnessing an important movement at Tunis Carthage International Airport, where planes loaded with medical equipment and oxygen and vaccines are coming to show the solidarity with Tunisia and with the Tunisian population. Back to the studio with our friend and colleague Beatrice Marshall.
Well, let's now turn to South Africa for the latest on Jacob Zuma's ongoing trial. The High Court has agreed to postpone it to August the 10th. The former president's trial for corruption charges resumed on Monday. Aisha Tal takes a closer look at the arguments made by both sides in court.
He's also, my lord, with respect, entitled to watch.
For the first time since his arrest, Jacob Zuma appeared virtually in court. According to the National Prosecution Authority, the trial is being held online to avoid further disruptions. Zuma's arrest sparked protests in his home province of KwaZulu-Natal, with violence spreading to Gauteng province. His lawyers argued against holding the trial virtually.
He's entitled to be present in court to follow the arguments that are being made, whether they're factual arguments or legal arguments, whether they're on paper or they're not on paper. He is entitled to sit with his lawyers to follow what is going on in a courtroom.
They also called for the recusal of Chief Prosecutor Billy Downer, accusing him of leaking information to the media. The prosecution, on its part, pushed against the motions.
Given that there is no need for any oral evidence, it is lawful and permissible for your lordship to decide the case on this virtual platform today.
The prosecution continued to accuse Zuma of trying to delay the trial. The former South African president faces corruption charges stemming from a $3.4 billion arms deal. Asta Tal, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Violence in eastern DR Congo displaces about 20,000 people. And Sudan to seek debt relief from Gulf Arab nations.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
New figures show that nearly 20,000 people have had to flee their homes in the past 6 weeks because of violence in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The United Nations Refugee Agency says attacks have been carried out by armed groups in the restive province of North Kivu. It is thought the ongoing insurgency has also claimed hundreds of lives. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa reports from Kinshasa.
Attacks by armed groups in the DRC's eastern territory of Beni have displaced thousands of people since last month. The UN says nearly 20,000 people have been forced to flee to neighboring areas. Many of them are women and children. Congolese officials have blamed the attacks on a militia known as the Allied Democratic Forces. It's an Islamist group that's originally from neighboring Uganda. The UN Refugee Agency is calling on the international community to support the DRC government to protect its people.
There's a need for guns to be silenced in the DRC. And to the rest of the world, obviously, it's not just a question of funding, it's a question of sympathy and solidarity. And solidarity can be shown in so many other ways. So there's a lot that the international community can do as well.
In May this year, the DRC president placed 2 eastern provinces under military rule in an attempt to stop the violence. But attacks against civilians have continued in Ituri and North Kivu provinces. The UN says the illegal exploitation of minerals in those areas has fueled conflict for decades. The insecurity has made it difficult for humanitarian agencies to access the populations in need of assistance. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
In South Sudan, thousands of people are seeking safety in UN camps. They have been fleeing attacks in their villages in the southwestern part of the country. The United Nations says it is investigating incidents of violence by armed groups there. Here is CGTN's Wanja Mungai with more.
Many families in Tambora neighborhood in South Sudan are in despair. Attackers have been wreaking havoc in the villages, burning houses, looting and reportedly killing people. The locals have been unable to cope and had to abandon their homes. Now they decry a threat to their lives and loss of livelihoods.
We are suffering with our children. There is no way to go to the farm and collect some food like cassava or its leaves. We really need peace, nothing more, only peace.
The violence in South Sudan is mainly conducted by rebel groups opposed to the government and at times community rivalry. Churches and schools have become their refuge, and while some are counting losses of their property, others are worried about the whereabouts of their relatives.
We have a number of persons still disappeared, and this is very, very concerning. IDPs are looking also for their husbands, for their fathers, for their sons, and they've gone missing. Apart from this human life that has been lost or disappeared, we have the material damage that is also very concerning.
The United Nations and other humanitarian organizations have been helping improve their living conditions, supplying them with foodstuff like grains and cooking oil.
We have been suffering, running from place to place without food. But today I'm grateful for the United Nations because they came to our rescue with some food items. I'm very happy.
The UN says so far 1.6 million Sudanese people have been displaced. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
Sudan will seek debt relief from several Gulf Arab nations. Sudan's finance minister said the government will ask Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait to reschedule the country's debt. He added that talks will focus on a 6-year grace period for payments. Official figures put Sudan's foreign debt at $60 billion. The Paris Club, a group of 22 countries, agreed to $14.1 billion in debt relief. The World Bank and the IMF announced that Sudan meets the criteria for over $50 billion in debt relief. For more analysis, let's turn to Tabit Jacob, a researcher at the Institute for Society and Globalization at Roskilde University. He joins us from Gothenburg in Sweden. Thank you for joining us on the program. So how important is this debt relief for Sudan?
Thank you very much. The debt relief is very important. Before I get into the question, I should remind you viewers that this comes as a result of a series of reforms that have been undertaken by the Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok, who is a very respected economist and a former staff of the World Bank. He has done a series of reforms, including tackling human rights issues, addressing issues of fuel subsidies, turning around the business climate. So Sudan has been rewarded. We should also remember that last year the US lifted 27 years of sanctions against Sudan. So he's been rewarded for his effort to tackle some of the pressing development challenges facing Sudan.
So with this kind of turnaround that you're talking about with Prime Minister Hamdok, how is Sudan's economy at the moment? And give us a bit more understanding of the steps that are needed to try to revive the country's economy.
So the Sudanese economy at the moment is not really in good shape. For those who have been following development, there have been protests in Khartoum and elsewhere where people are protesting against shortage of bread, shortage of fuel because the government has reduced their fuel subsidies. Most Western companies have left Sudan. Sudan's foreign reserves have been on the decline. So as much as they've done quite a lot, the country still faces quite a lot of challenges. Youth unemployment is huge on the rise, and also the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic as well. So it's not really looking good. And what can he do? Of course, there's a lot that he can do. I think getting this debt relief is a welcome move, because it sends signal to investors and also to the rest of the world that Sudan is again, a suitable place to do business. It also allows him to focus on some of the most important reforms that he has embarked on, especially turning around agriculture and infrastructure, two of the most key important sectors that Sudan depends on. However, I'm a little bit skeptical because he's going to seek further debt relief from three Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Kuwait. And I should mention that these countries are currently facing two major challenges, the economic fallout from the pandemic, but also the falling oil and gas prices. And actually, the projection from the IMF indicate that both UAE, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia are going to contract this year. So I think the Saudis and the UAEs and the Kuwaitis are going to focus much on, improving their own domestic financial troubles, instead of just focusing to assist Sudan at the moment.
All right, Tabit Jacob joining us there from Gothenburg in Sweden. Thank you. To Somalia now, where the Union of Presidential Candidates has called for a special meeting on the country's upcoming elections while raising concerns about the exercise. The election team has issued a statement giving a final timetable. The senatorial elections will begin on July the 25th before the elections of the deputies, which will end on October the 7th. Meanwhile, the Somali National Army, also known as the SNA, has announced the killing of about 50 Al-Shabaab militants in separate operations. Al-Shabaab has not commented on the latest security operation by government forces, but SNA spokesperson Ali Hashi Abdi says such operations will continue to be sustained against the militia group in Lower Juba and other regions. Well, let's now take a look at your business news. Here's what's coming up. South Africa's unrest could dent economic growth this year. And Tunisia secures $70 million in funding from the African Development Bank to support economic recovery.
taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Violent protests in South Africa have dealt a body blow to the government's efforts to rebuild the economy in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. Protests began last week after former President Jacob Zuma handed himself in to police to serve a 15-month sentence for contempt of court. Economists now expect the looting and rioting that have since laid waste to swathes of KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng to curtail economic growth in South Africa this year. The unrest, however, is not likely to spark a rate cut this week when the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee meets. In a new policy brief, the Institute for Economic Justice has also called on the government to roll out a short-term $5 billion emergency relief package over the next 3 months. The IEJ's latest proposal was prepared prior to the outbreak of the ongoing unrest and aims to cushion the economic effects of level 4 COVID-19 restrictions. While Tunisia has secured a $70 million funding from the African Development Bank to implement its economic recovery and social support program, Tunisia is facing economic challenges further compounded by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It has turned to international lenders to back its battered economy and vaccination campaign. From Tunisia's Adnan Chauchi with the details.
Tunisia's pandemic-battered economy has received a shot in the arm after an approval of a credit facility by the African Development Bank. The announcement follows the meeting in May between Tunisian President Kais Saied and the AFDB president, who pledged support for the North African state during its post-COVID-19 recovery. The AFDB president also noted that Tunisia needs to implement several structural reforms in order to achieve inclusive growth.
For this year, the African Development Bank will strongly support Tunisia with a $270 million funding. $70 million will be dedicated to the positive support of the Tunisian state. We discussed the importance of inclusive growth and job creation for youths during this period.
Tunisian Social Affairs Minister has welcomed the funding and said it will support the economic recovery process by improving the investment climate, preserving employment and promoting social inclusion through new mechanisms to address social challenges exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic.
This funding will allow us to support the sectors and the economic activities most affected by the pandemic and the lockdown measures since May 2021. The successive general lockdowns have paralyzed many businesses and caused unprecedented layoffs.
Authorities in Tunis added that the objective of the program is to improve the efficiency of social spending by streamlining social assistance programs and adopting a more targeted approach to beneficiary populations.
Even the citizens who do not have social security will benefit from this financial support. We are aware that tens of thousands of people lost their source of income and were unable to find new jobs. The crisis is affecting all social classes and categories.
The funding from the Abidjan-based Lanta will also support 230,000 employees threatened by layoffs and who are exposed to technical unemployment to preserve their jobs or provide them with social assistance. 1.4 million microcredit applicants will also be able to access banking services thanks to the program. According to the African Development Bank, mitigating the socio-economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and supporting a more sustainable and inclusive economic recovery are the AFDB's priorities to help Tunisia emerge from the current economic and social crisis. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Tanzania recorded 8-year high coffee exports in the recently ended 9-month season, thanks to COVID-19 lockdowns, which spiked coffee drinking rates. The season saw Tanzania make around $137 million from coffee exports, a 20% increase from the previous season. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has more from Dar es Salaam.
Godfrey Mzava has years of experience exporting grain. However, logistical challenges due to COVID-19 lockdowns around the world unexpectedly shifted his attention to coffee, earning him an income in difficult times.
When the COVID-19 pandemic began, we were very surprised to get orders to export coffee. We didn't do much last year given the fact that we were only starting off. We got an order from Vietnam and one from China. This year, we already have 3 orders lined up.
Tanzania has traditionally exported its coffee to Japan and Europe. Authorities are now keen on capitalizing on China's growing interest in Tanzanian produce.
Many traders, they prefer to trade in China as it's quick and also easy to trade with China compared to Europe market. So we think there was that big demand compared to our capacity of producing last year. And also we expect this year it will be the same because we receive a lot of inquiries from China market.
While exports are booming, only 5 to 7% of Tanzanian coffee is consumed locally. The government's stated goal is to boost these numbers to at least 10% by 2025. According to the Tanzania Coffee Board, coffee represents about 5% of Tanzania's total exports, earning the country an average of $100 million every year over the last 30 years. With a growing demand for the country's coffee, authorities are worried about the lack of information dampening the enthusiasm of potential exporters. They are hoping the recent launch of a trade portal will help garner more interest from traders.
Most traders, they think that it's very complicated to acquire export documents, some of them, and that's why we are basically putting effort on creating awareness on export procedures and requirement documents for export.
The government wants to exceed its current output of 70,000 tons of coffee annually. It hopes to offer farmers, traders, and thousands of their dependents in the country more income and better lives. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Egyptian e-commerce platform Max AB has secured $40 million funding to help it expand across the country and the broader Middle East and North African region. The platform, which manages procurement and grocery delivery, is helping suppliers to tap into technology to boost supply chains. CGTN's Yasa Hakim has more from Cairo.
Maxab is continuing its success story with a new $40 million Series A funding. The 3-year-old startup is filling a vacuum in the food and grocery retail sector by cutting the 6-layer supply chain for thousands of small retail stores countrywide. Suppliers also benefit from the startup's end-to-end business intelligence tools that allow suppliers to accurately predict, monitor, and control the impact of their strategies in real time.
We're an end-to-end distribution B2B e-commerce platform. What we provide and the value proposition of the company today is that we have 24-hour delivery. Meanwhile, we contribute to around 35% of the shelf space of the retailer. So it's the one-stop shop for that retailer, making his business easier to implement.
Maxab made headlines in 2019 when it broke the record for the highest seed for a startup in the Middle East and North Africa, with $6.5 million just a year after it was set up. We visited the facility back then and discussed the potential of the service.
It's a $50 billion market, right? So 10% of that market is $5 billion. So when you see a good team and at the right time solving a huge, huge problem, it's one of the single biggest items on the GDP of Egypt is groceries. It's around 16 to 17% alone.
Since 2019, the company's value grew 5-fold year on year. Its assets jumped from 3 warehouses in Cairo to 17 warehouses in 7 cities and has provided 1,600 jobs. This helped secure the latest $40 million series round.
The main reason for this fund is for us to expand in the MENA region. We still don't know exactly where we're going. We have a few countries that we've pinpointed. It depends on the value proposition as well as the market product fit. But we see 3 to 2 countries that might be of great benefit for us to move there.
Macsab's success reflects the growth of the startup sector in the North African country. According to Magnet Startup Annual 2020 report, Egypt is the most active venture capital market in the Middle East and North Africa, and the second most funded after the United Arab Emirates. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, we still have more news for you here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. Egypt and Cameroon eye the first ever Olympics medals in shooting and judo. Ahmed Zaher is one of Egypt's most successful shooters. He has stood on the World Championships podium thrice in the past 2 years, winning 2 silvers and a bronze medal. This is the closest the country has come to gold in shooting. Now at the Tokyo 2020, Egypt can look forward to a first Olympics medal in the sport. CGTN's Adel Makhroui brings us more.
Since his first Olympic appearance in London 2012, all that Ahmed Zaher could think about is winning an Olympic medal. Back then, he was 22 years old. Ironically, he ended up in the 22nd place. Putting the vision of him holding an Olympic medal as one of his life missions, he's been steadily growing since. Tokyo comes at a time when his shooting career is at its best, but the COVID-19 pandemic was a major obstacle to his preparations.
Due to the stop of COVID-19, as you can see, there's no way that we can train in our homes. We stopped for a long time. We started preparing for the Olympic Games after the stop of 1 year. We started shooting competitions abroad. We went to Morocco. We had training camps in Italy. We shot a World Cup in Egypt, another World Cup in Italy. And now we have another training camp in Italy before going to the Olympic Games. Then we're ready after that.
Egypt's proximity to Italy has given its national shooting team great exposure to some of the world's best shooters. The national team has also hired an Italian coach, eyeing to make history this year. On top of that, the 31-year-old trap Egyptian champion says that surviving through the global pandemic has in a way helped his sports career.
I believe it's a positive thing because in order to come back after stopping for 6 months, 7 months, and try to perform as you used to shoot, as you used to perform, it's making me grow mentally, which is a very important aspect of our game. So I guess it made me mentally tougher. It's been 9 years from the last Olympic Games. I gained a lot of experience, I gained medals, so it's different. Now I believe I can really win a medal in the Olympic Games.
Since 2019, Zaher appeared in the top 10 list of world competitions more frequently than any time in his career. More importantly, he stood 3 times on podiums of World Cups, winning 3 silvers in single, mixed and team events. He's part of one of the strongest shooting teams Egypt has ever seen.
This time, hopefully it's different. We were qualified to the Olympic Games through World Cups, not African Championship, which is different. Mentally for us it's different because you believe that you won already a World Cup. That means you can win again in the Olympic Games. All you have to do is give 100% during the competition, and hopefully it will go well, and we hope to win medals.
Only one African nation won a shooting medal at the Summer Olympics. South Africa made this historic step with a silver medal in the 1920 Games. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Array Ayuk, Ote Sofina and Vanessa Mbala Atangana will take to the judo mat in Cameroon colors at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics when action starts on Saturday. Ote Sofina has been training in Yaoundé before leaving for Tokyo. CGTN's Nokutula Shabalala brings us her story.
It is the dojo of the Panthers Judo Club, located in the Bastos district of Yaoundé in Cameroon. That's where Ote Sofina trained for the Olympics every morning. She competes in the under 70 kilograms category. Wearing a white kimono and a black belt, Sofina worked tirelessly to sharpen her skills. Training consisted of sending her opponents to the ground using hip, foot and leg techniques. Fast and agile, Sofina does not hesitate to use moves with her back on the ground or with her side on the ground when needed. With days to go before the judo competition opens in Tokyo on Saturday, Ote Sofina is satisfied with her current form.
I have started an external training course with a national coach. We have just finished one of the first sessions of our preparation for Tokyo. For the moment, everything is going very well and we will see how things will evolve. I feel good mentally and morally because representing my country at the biggest sporting competition on the planet is a real honor for me.
We work a lot on the physical level. We are also trying to strengthen the achievement, especially on the technical level, with various partners we have. So far, I can say that the training is going very well. It is necessary that the athletes are motivated to the maximum, and as a technician, we try to give them everything we have on the mat. Morale is good right now. We are looking forward to the start of the competition.
Ote Sofina has a storied career on the continental scene, scooping 9 medals, 3 gold, 2 silver and 4 bronze at African competitions. The 27-year-old, who will be making her Olympics debut in Tokyo, has great ambitions. Her local federation has been supporting the 3-time Africa Open champion and 2020 African silver medalist to realize her goal of scaling the podium in Japan.
I would like to win a medal for my country during the future Olympic Games. This will allow me to honor all my teammates who give their all during training, my coach and also the federation who put this dojo at my disposal so that I can train.
The 24 best athletes in the world in each category will be in Tokyo. The fights are done in several stages and things can go very fast. We are in the process of making arrangements to try win at least 1 medal and be among the countries whose flags will be raised on the podiums of the Olympic Games. I think that we all have our chances, since it is the best athletes who go to these competitions. So if we are among these athletes, it means that we have the level and that we can win medals in Tokyo.
Cameroon is one of the few African countries to have 2 judokas qualify for the Olympic Games. Vanessa Mbala Atangana, the second representative from the country, will feature in over 78 kilogram category and is ranked 14th in the world. Atangana has won 14 medals, including 11 at the African Championships, 2 at the African Games and 1 on the Commonwealth Games. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
To Kenya now, where 2-time Africa high jump champion Matthew Sawe is optimistic of putting in a good show at the Tokyo Olympics. The 33-year-old is eyeing a new personal best to improve on his current mark of 2.30 meters, which also stands as the national record. Sawe sealed his spot to the Tokyo Games through the world rankings on the 29th of June when he placed 24th by the close of the qualification window. Boasting a wealth of experience from major events over the years, Sawe is keen to leave a mark at the largest and most prestigious sporting event, despite being out of competitive action for a long spell due to the pandemic. The high jumper and Olympic javelin silver medalist Julius Yego are the only field event athletes in Team Kenya. Meanwhile, Kenya women's volleyball team Malkia Strikers have arrived in Tokyo from their training base of Kurume City in Japan ahead of their Pool A opener against hosts and two-time Olympic champions Japan on Sunday. Besides the hosts, Kenya will take on Beijing 2008 and London 2012 gold winners Brazil, Serbia, Korea and the Dominican Republic. Malkia Strikers wrapped their 5-day pre-Olympics training camp in Kurume City, Fukuoka Prefecture on Monday and arrived in Tokyo this morning. The team libero, Agrippina Kundu, believes the team can reach the quarterfinals of the Olympic Games for the first time on their third appearance, following back-to-back 11th finishes at the Sydney 2000 and Athens 2004 editions.
We are visitors. Japan are home. It is good there are no funds, meaning it's like everyone is away from home. We will take them on head-on. All these teams are good, including us as Malkia Strikers, whether it is Serbia or Brazil or Dominican Republic. Anyone who does not take us seriously will be in for a rude shock. We are ambitious enough to dream of quarterfinals. We want to slay two giants and we are in the quarterfinals. We will have achieved a lot.
Also arriving in Tokyo is the fourth batch of the Chinese delegation for the Olympic Games. The women's volleyball team were the first to make their appearance at the arriving hall at around 4 p.m. local time on Monday, arriving to a warm welcome. This batch also includes the women's basketball team, as well as those competing in diving, weightlifting, shooting, swimming, street skateboarding, fencing, equestrian, kayak slalom, judo and 3-1-3 basketball. The total delegation consists of 298 female and 133 male athletes competing across 225 events. And famed women's volleyball coach Lang Ping says the Olympic experience is different from the usual circuit.
We are very excited as we waited for 5 years, which is quite some time. Now we have a chance to begin our Olympic journey again, and I hope we can play our best to gain honor for our nation.
This feels different from Rio 2016 due to the coronavirus, and the atmosphere is not as warm as we would have expected.
Well, the USA Basketball have announced that American guard Zach LaVine has entered health and safety protocols and did not fly to Tokyo. The organization said in a statement that they hope the 26-year-old will be able to join up with the team at a later date this week. Team USA have already lost guard Bradley Ball, who was forced to go into health and safety protocols last week, and forward Kevin Love, who withdrew because he is